Well, thanks. I'm super excited to be here today. I love ReactDayBerlin. I love Berlin. I love React. And React is awesome. I mean, it provides the fundamental building blocks for creating a splendid application from scratch, allowing you to choose each ingredient step by step. It's sometimes working with React, it feels like making a pizza. You have some basic constraints, such as its shapes and the traditional method of building it. And by incorporating all your functionalities, components, dependencies, libraries, and logic, you end up with your perfect pizza. But a few months later, that once glorious and beautiful pizza transforms into this. Yeah. But with React. Who has experienced this? Raise your hand. Almost everyone. Yeah, that's typical. And David Lord once said that programs, like people, get old. We can't prevent aging, but we could try to limit its effects. So, too long, didn't read the blog quote. Software tends to degrade over time. Within 20 minutes, I'll be sharing best practices, insights, and common pitfalls related to 5 distinct React topics. First, we would talk about component performance, state management, testing and accessibility, logic business, and finally, files, folders, and code structure. So, in short, a few React best practices. Guten Morgen. Wie geht es dir? Mein Name ist Miguel Ángel Durán, and ich komme aus Barcelona, Spain, and this is all the German that I know, so sorry for sorry because I tried hard. Bitte. I create content about web development in YouTube and Twitch. Just in case you want to start learning Spanish, who knows? You can find me in YouTube with midu.tube or on Twitch, midu.live. A bit about myself. I have over 15 years of experience in software development. I may look young, but I'm approaching 40. I've been working with React for 7 years now, starting with the infamous create class. Anyone tried create class from here? Yeah, a few of you, yeah. I'll give you a hug after the talk. Fortunately, we've moved past that era. My most recent role was as front-end lead at Adevinta Spain, where I spent 5 years. There we undertook the significant task of migrating a monolithic application to a new React application. And a year ago, I made the leap from my day-to-day job to focus on creating content on Twitch and developing my own products. So before starting, because I want to acknowledge that discussions about best practices can often ignite passion. I mean, and that could be cool, but sometimes even a bit of fanatism. So best practices from 5 years ago or today are not the same as maybe they would be in 2 weeks, 1 month, or 1 year later. These practices might evolve over time, or they may not be applicable to your specific use case, because context matters. Factors such as team expertise, organizational structure, the libraries in use, the need for rapid iteration, even at the cost of technical debt, all play a role. So, even if you disagree with some of these practices, which is completely fine, I encourage you to remain open-minded and make your own. I'll skip over some of the more common known best practices for React applications, okay? And let's begin with state management. I'm pretty sure that you know this library logo, Redux. It's everywhere and in every code base. And the most simple use of use selector to extract a state from the store would be this one. And we import the hook from React Redux and use it to access the specific slice of a state we are interested in. And as we could observe if even with the simplest component, simpler component, our component becomes intertwined with the React Redux package. This approach is manageable for small projects or maybe medium-sized projects, but could be pose challenges as the project scales up. If you want to change to substance, somebody could think about use find and replace, but it's not that easy because you have a tons of results, and it has some drawbacks because you could miss some files. It's a manual process, a lot of file changes, and even maybe it's too complex because some components like this one, it's even for a small component, it's bloated with numerous references to Redux. So one piece of advice for best practices on React would be to grab your state library with your own hooks. It's advisable to encapsulate your state library because and this is applicable to any library, because it ensures a more streamlined and adaptable integration of state management within your application. So obviously, you could create a custom hook, and that would be something like that. And the most important thing is not even the custom hook, but the naming of it. Because if you notice the name of the hook, it doesn't specify how or from where we are extracting the data, but rather it focuses on the data itself. And when we are using it, we are removing any specification of React Redux. And even if we check the most complex example in this instance, the improvement is going to be significant. We move from this, that is super bloated with React Redux code, to something like this. Now it's understandable. It doesn't care about where are getting the data, and it's focused in a few lines of code. So do not leak your library across all your components. Avoid this kind of custom hooks of use store, use local storage, use fetch, and instead focus on your data. And name your custom hooks in order to change the implementation, and don't even have to go to every one of your components to move from one library to another. Now, talking about component performance, use memo and use callback are designed as performance optimization tools for React applications, but I would say that they should be used only when truly necessary. And I mean, a lot of times on my last company, we had a lot of code like this one. They are utilizing the use memo hook to prevent recreating posts on every render if the posts remain unchanged. And this approach could make sense sometimes for some specific cases, but the problem is that sometimes you find something like this inside a component. The issue arises because the same component is using one use callback and use memo 4 times. And this overuse complicates readability, adds unnecessary complexity, and in some instances doesn't result in a tangible performance improvement. So what can we do? We could wait for React Forget, the new compiler that React team is working. It's still under development. It was announced in 2021, and it's designed to automatically memorize our components and functions. 3 months ago, they shared a small update that they are still working on it. I don't know if it's going to be launched any day. But another possible solution could be consider using Million. Million is a virtual DOM replacement for React, and you don't need to change or add complexity and lines of code in your code base, but instead it offers a significant performance improvement automatically. So it compiles, it adds like a wrapper in some components, and it improves their performance, and you don't have to change anything. You don't have to add use memo or use callback. It doesn't do the same, but the performance improvement is considerable. What I want to share is this kind of phrase that is super important. The premature optimization is the root of all evil. The piece of advice here is that you have to profile from the dev tools to identify which components are being re-rendered. But not only that, but also check the cost of it. Because sometimes, even if it takes 1 millisecond or even less, it doesn't make any sense to put more code in order to try to fix something that is not a problem. Talking about testing and accessibility, consider an application using Amazon as an example. If you were limited to performing just one type of testing, which would it be? Unit tests, integration tests? The obvious choice would be an end-to-end test. If you only have one test in your application, it should be an end-to-end test. And currently, there's no excuse for not implementing some end-to-end tests in your application to critical functionalities. Nowadays, these tests are faster than some years ago, and they are more affordable. And we have some tools like Playwright that they are mind-blowing. For example, they have this Visual Studio Code extension where you open your website, and while you are navigating your website and you are trying it, your application, then it's writing for you all the code. And even the API is super awesome because it's super similar to React testing library that I think and I find that this is the best API for testing for React applications. And also about accessibility, a lot of times people don't care about accessibility. Sometimes it's because we are, I don't know, ignorance, maybe we are lacking information about how to fix those things. My recommendation would be to install this package, xcore/React. It's super easy to understand. It's straight to the point. And I'll show you how to configure it and the information that you are going to grab. You could create a method to report accessibility issues like this one. The only thing is that it's going to be executed on client and on development mode. And we're using some dynamic import needed, dynamic import to only import those dependencies for development. So we avoid adding to the bundle, to the production bundle, these packages. Then, in your entry point, you should use this new method, 2 lines of code, report accessibility, and then pass the React instance really to the method. And that's the information that you are going to get. You are going to get in the console log. You are going to get some issues, serious issues, moderate issues, and not only the typical issues that you could find in the Lighthouse, which they are cool, but some more interesting even for the semantic of the HTML, the missing area roles, and much else. Talking about logic business, normally, if we see a use effect in a component, it could be a smell of something. It's not a silver bullet, but it might be an indicator that it could be a refactor into a custom hook. This is a typical example of usage of use effect, and we could extract it to a custom hook. And even we could go further using use query from React query in order to avoid the need to manually manage states for loading, error, and data. But sometimes custom hooks are not enough, at least for bigger apps, for enterprise apps. So the idea would be to extract your logic from components. So one idea would be we have this custom hook, use real estates. We are grabbing real estates. But consider this scenario, a custom hook that is burdened with numerous responsibilities, like validation of the data, of the input, data fetching, and the mapping. And what is even worse is when we're trying to extract logic from our React components, and we end doing something like this. It seems that it's better, but the problem is that we are passing as parameters a way to update our local state. So our logic should be agnostic to the framework, and this is not. This would be a little bit better. We have something that is completely agnostic to React. So we could use this to React Native, Vue, Angular, well, maybe not for Angular, because we don't use Angular, but, but for any framework, even for vanilla JavaScript. But you could go one step more using clean architecture. Sometimes clean architecture could make sense if you are working in a very big company. If you are only a team of 3, maybe it's not. It could be our engineer. But in a company with hundreds of developers, it could make sense to create value objects and entities based on the domain-specific design, repository interfaces in order to be able to change from your API repository or maybe local storage repository or directly to database repository. You could create your own API repository and even create a service that you could inject if you are using the API repository or you are using a mock repository. So this is great because this is helping to test our logic business without the need of thinking about React. The logic business is the most important thing that you are going to have because React, I hope that it's going to be alive for a few more years, but the logic business is what is making money for you. And you could move your logic business to a different library, even for different devices, applications, and so on. And have you seen this image on Twitter, right? It was the meme. And the problem with this kind of images is that it lacks context. This is the possibility that you could do with Next.js now, with React, with the form actions. But the thing is that you are able to extract this to a different file. You are not forced to do this inline inside the button. In this case, you are able to extract all the logic of the server actions, and you could do some validations. You could do everything. And the only important thing is that you use the use server magic string on the file. And then it becomes invisible to the client bundle. The last thing is files, folders, and code structure. It's super interesting because there are tons and tons of articles on the internet talking about this. And it's normal because it's a challenge. It's super important about the context of each application and because everyone has a different opinion of it. But one thing that is, for me, super, super important, if you check this code, appears to be fine, but there is a subtle bug that could cause your continuous integration system, particularly if it's based on Linux, to fail. And it's super hard to see. And I know by experience that it could take hours to get the error. The problem with this code is this. The thing is that Unix systems are case sensitive, whereas Mac systems, that is the one that we're using, except this one that is using Adele, are case insensitive. So my hot take about this is avoiding camel case for file names and folders. Prefer KCase even for React components. And I know that this is not popular. I know it. A lot of people now are taking photos. I know about it. But I thought, like some years ago, that the perfect case for React components were Pascal case. And after that, I was like checking a lot of repositories on GitHub about popular projects like Next.js, and they are using KCase for all their files, even React components. And if you don't like Next.js or Vercel because, I don't know, peanuts, even Remix in their repository for components, they are using KCase. And that is not why they invented it. I mean, there is a reason behind this. So I know that it could be hard, but for me, it's not negotiable. Another thing is always using import alias to enhance maintainability of the code. Import aliases enable you to avoid using relative paths in your imports. So this kind of code that are super hard to read and understand where they come from, they become from this to this. It's much clearer by utilizing import aliases. And finally, talking about folder structure. This is the classic folder structure. I mean, it's fine. It's good for a lot of things. It's perfect for small and medium projects. But when things get bigger, it's hard to scale. There's a different kind of folder structure that is super interesting for big and huge projects, and is that your architecture should inform readers about the system itself rather than the frameworks and dependencies that you are using. In the classic one, you have even a folder that is called Redux. So in this case, if you are I don't know, building a healthcare system, then new programmers view the source repository, and their initial impression should be, oh, this is a healthcare system. Some drawbacks, of course. The learning curve is complicated, the initial overload, the duplication risk, because maybe you duplicate some components. But at the end, for huge projects, it's a must. And in 20 minutes, it's complicated to talk about all the best practices on React. I try to share some based on my knowledge and my experience. But the most important thing is that you don't have to be afraid of changing your mind. For me, for example, it was like the case for file systems or components on the React applications. And sometimes it's only about checking, trying, and trying again. Before we go, one more thing. I would like to invite you to check Advent.js, an Advent calendar with challenges for JavaScript and TypeScript, developed with React, of course, available in English, Portuguese, and Spanish. But if you ask me to translate it to German, I will do it. Well, I'm not doing it. It's doing ChatGPT. But Dankeschön.